Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is a case that is very controversial, and it is known as the West Memphis Three. It has had so much publicity in the US since it actually happened, and it has stayed so for many years. And again, you'll see as we get into it, like all the controversy around it and surrounding it, and you make your own opinions as always. This case was suggested by Brittany, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have. And of course, if you have any more, please do let me know. So this case takes place in West Memphis in Arkansas in the US in 1993 when 3 young boys are reported as missing. We have Steve Branch, who was also known as Stevie, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers. Steve Edward Branch was born on the 26th of November in 1984 to parents Stephen and Pamela. Now the couple did get a divorce when he was very young, and Pamela would be the one who got custody of Stevie, which obviously normally is the mum. Not long after this, she met a man called Terry Hobbs, and she eventually married him, so he became Stevie's stepdad. And with that union, not only did he gain a stepfather, he gained a stepsister too, who was called Amanda, and she was 4 years old. He went to Weaver Elementary School along with the 2 other boys, and they all attended this local Cub Scout pack as well. These boys were the best of friends, and let me just put in a note here that will come in later on as we get through the case, but by all accounts, Stevie and Amanda were apparently frightened of Terry Hobbs, so I will go into more detail on that later on, and it does come into play, but just for now, I'm just going to leave it at that. Christopher Mark Byers was born on the 23rd of June in 1984 to parents Melissa Defer and Ricky Maria. When Christopher got to the age of 4, unfortunately his parents got a divorce too, and not long after that, she met and married his stepfather, John Mark Byers. And John actually went on to adopt Christopher as his own, so he literally put through the adoption papers and adopted him as his own son. With this union, he gained an older stepbrother who was called Sean Ryan Clark, and he was 13 years old. Christopher was described as being a very typical young boy. He still believed in things like the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. You know, he was just a typical little boy. James Michael Moore was born on the 27th of July in 1984 to parents Todd and Dana Moore. He also had an older sister called Dawn, and she was 9. Now, he absolutely loved going to scout meetings, and he would often be seen in his uniform even when he wasn't going to these meetings. That's how much he loved it. He was very much considered to be the leader of these 3 boys as well. They were all really good friends, and he was kind of the one who would make decisions for them and things like that. He led the group. So where they were situated was pretty much in the smack bang middle of what is called the Bible Belt, and obviously there are a lot of Christians and things there. It is very religious, and so not directly as a result of that, but it was a safe place to be, or it was thought to be a safe place to be, and so a lot of people would let their kids go off, do whatever they want, go and play on their own, you know, even being so young. And with the times then, it was just normal, and that is what they did. So these 3 boys were allowed the same. They would often go off together and just play together. And an area that they actually really liked to play in was called Robin Hood Hills. And that is where they went that fateful day to play and have fun. Christopher Byers was the first one to be reported missing. He was reported missing by his adoptive father, John, around 7 p.m. And that was on the 5th of May. It is believed that what happened to these boys, the crime that was committed that day, happened between 6:30, which is when they were last seen by people, and 8 p.m. Obviously an hour after the first boy was reported missing. I have read somewhere as well that Terry Hobbs, Stevie's stepdad, was the last one to have been known to see him. Something about he shouted him to come home or something like that. I don't know. He was seen with him, and he is the last person to have been seen with him, apparently. So obviously all of the families realise that their children are missing. They are devastated, and they go out looking for them like you would do. And of course, they'd already called the police at 7 o'clock, but that was fairly late when they had been reported missing. And so, yes, the police did come out, but they were losing daylight, and they didn't really do this huge, massive search. They did a search, don't get me wrong, they did. But probably because of how dark it was and you know, they didn't have much information to go on. Last they knew, the boys were out playing. You know, they didn't really know anything untoward about anything. And so the search was called off pretty early, but they were going to start anew the next day. So during this search, the initial search, the little one that was done, you know, family, friends, locals were all out looking for him, including the police. But they didn't find anything. Apparently, people had actually searched the area where the boys would later be found, but just not very intensely. Again, it was so dark, it would have just been so difficult to even see anything. And so, even though they were in that area, they didn't find anything. So, 8 AM comes around the next morning, the 6th of May, and they set out this huge scale search. It was led by Crittenden County Search and Rescue. They went on to search all of West Memphis, but primarily focused on Robin Hood Hills, where the boys were last known to be seen and where they played a lot. Now, by all accounts, the search was huge. They literally had a chain link of people pretty much holding hands, essentially, walking side by side up the fields, canvassing everywhere so that they didn't miss a single thing. They didn't want any gaps in between them, because then, you know, they're less likely to miss something. They needed to find these boys. They really, really did. Despite this, they found no signs of anything. They didn't find the boys. They didn't find any clothing or, you know what I mean, anything. Nothing was left behind. They found absolutely nothing. It was around 6 hours into the search at about 1:45 PM that somebody found something. It was actually a parole officer called Steve Jones. Now, he noticed what looked like a boys' trainer in this muddy creek. Apparently, it was this part of this major drainage into the canal of Robin Hood Hills. So he goes down to investigate. He can't be sure that it's a boy's shoe, and it could just be any random shoe. So he goes down, he goes to investigate. As he puts his foot in the water to try and get the shoe, he gets snagged on something, and what he actually gets snagged on is one of the boys' bodies. It was there that they made the grim discovery of the 3 boys. Now, apparently this was all documented. You can literally go online and see the boys' bodies. Of course, I don't want to put that in this video because it's just not something that a lot of people will want to see. But if you are interested in that and you want to go and look it up, then go ahead. You will be able to find it online. I've also seen some really, really devastating footage of one of the mothers finding out that her son, and it's really, really, really upsetting, like how she reacts. It's so tragic. The boys were all found naked. They had been hogtied, so like the left arm was tied to the left foot and vice versa on the other side. And they were tied up with their own shoelaces. They did find their clothes scattered throughout kind of the creek, and a lot of them were turned inside out. Some of them had been wrapped around a stick and then shoved into the mud. I don't know why, whether they were trying to get rid of them or I don't know. Don't know the purpose behind that, but it was. They recovered one set of the boys' underwear, but they couldn't find the other 2. All of the boys' bodies had what looked to be bite marks along with scratches and possible penetrative wounds. So like a knife wound. Christopher was the only one that had damage to his genital area, and I am not getting into that because I'm just not. It's just horrific. You can look it up more if you want to, but that's about as much as I'm going to say on that. It was presumed that maybe they could have been sexually assaulted, but that was later disputed by experts. But they did recover sperm from one of the pants found at the scene, so who knows. They sent the bodies off for autopsy. It came back that Stevie and Michael had died with multiple injuries, but their actual cause of death was drowning. Christopher, again, died of multiple injuries, what was thought to be knife wounds. He did not die of drowning. There's a lot of dispute around Christopher's wounds. As I've said, they are suspected knife wounds, but later down the line, when this all went into trial and things like that, and the prosecution would claim that they were caused by a knife attack, whereas like the defense would claim that they were caused by animals in the area. I will get into that more later on. You will see what I mean and how that could be possible. But it's believed that it could have actually been post-mortem animal predation. They believed that the boys were playing in the area. They often played there, as I've already said, and that is where they were attacked and then brutally murdered. There wasn't really any drag marks or anything like that, and so if they would have been sort of attacked and killed elsewhere and then dumped there, you would have possibly seen drag marks or something along those lines to indicate that, but there was nothing like that. It is believed that the boys were attacked by more than one person, because how they were all tied up, the knots were done differently, which would make you assume that it was done by different people, because why would one person do different knots on all 3 boys? You just use the same knot. And it would be very hard for one person to subdue 3 boys. Like, if they attack one of them, it is very easy for the other 2 to just run away. How were they able to subdue 3 of them unless there was more than one, which is what is believed. They found drugs in Christopher's system, and he was the only one that they found drugs in. But Christopher was also diagnosed and prescribed drugs for his ADHD. Although I believe that the drug they found in his system was different to his prescribed drug, but I couldn't find too much information on that. Because of the genital damage on Christopher, it was really believed that this was some sort of satanic ritual or satanic cult thing, and that was why they mutilated him. And it's because that is a common practice in satanistic rituals. That rumour spread so fast when realistically there wasn't ever any proof that it was anything to do with a Satanist at all, just that his genitals had been mutilated, which again could have been caused by animals. You know, it literally could have been. The police received a phone call from a few people saying that they thought that one name sticks out to them, and that was an 18-year-old teenager called Damian Nichols. He was known to have an interest in the occult. He was known to dress in black, you know, dark clothing. He listened to dark music. And so straight away they're thinking Satanist, and it must have been him that did it. I don't know why as well. They did feel like he was capable of killing children, but I don't know the ins and outs of that. One of the main reasons that he was actually suspect was he had a girlfriend, and his girlfriend's aunt actually did ring the police and said that she saw him on that same day covered in mud. That was about 9 p.m, and obviously they assumed that this had happened to the boys between 6:30 and 8. And so if he's seen an hour later covered in mud, not far from the crime scene, along with the persona that he had, you know, it put him under a lot of suspicion. Damian Nichols had previously been arrested for shoplifting and vandalism. So, you know, he did have a little bit of a criminal record. He did go to school but ended up dropping out very early on. And whilst in school, he became very close friends with 16-year-old Jason Baldwin. They had similar tastes and hobbies and things like that, and they just got on really well. The pair also made it clear that they really didn't like the culture around West Memphis. Damian's family was not wealthy or anything like that, and apparently they had a lot of visits from social workers. On one occasion, he ran away from home with his girlfriend, and they ended up breaking into this trailer whilst it was raining, and they got caught for that. I believe she didn't serve any time, but he was charged with burglary. In 1992, he spent months in a mental institute, and it was stated that he was suffering from severe mental illnesses. There's also something I read somewhere that apparently he liked to ingest blood as well. I don't know whether that's true or where that came from, but I have read it somewhere. And obviously all these things just make him look more like a suspect, I guess. It shouldn't. Like, just because somebody's into Satanism and things like that and dresses in dark doesn't mean they're going around killing people. It really doesn't. There are a lot of Satanists out there who are very good people. Just because that is what they believe in doesn't mean they're all serial killers and murderers and whatever else. It just doesn't. But I don't know, that is just what they assumed at the time. Because of his history, because of how he was, which is so unfair. You should never do that, but that is what they did. As well as, obviously, the fact that he was seen covered in mud. So around the time of this case actually taking place, Damian was working part-time with a roofing company, and he was also expecting a baby with his girlfriend, Dominatia. Just 2 days after the bodies were found, we're now on the 7th of May, Damian was in the police's interview room. He denied everything. He had no involvement in the boys' murder whatsoever. He took a polygraph, but apparently that came back to say that he was being deceptive. He was then re-interviewed on the 9th, and the police asked him questions such as, how do you think the killer felt like when he was committing these murders? And Damian responded with probably good with what he had done. and like probably felt good about the control that he had over them and things like that. He also went on to say that he figured that they had gone into the woods and then the killers had convinced them to come out of the woods, that they were small and easy to control. He also said that the killer wouldn't be worried about them screaming because they were close to the woods and they were as close to this expressway. So granted, it seems suspicious that he's saying all of these things, but bearing in mind, the police have asked him these questions and he is answering those as honestly as he can, and I could answer those questions exactly like that. Because look, when you're into this kind of thing and you're researching the cases or you hear about it, like personally, obviously I've researched quite a few cases now, you kind of feel like you understand how the killer thinks in a sense. I don't understand what they do, obviously I would never ever understand someone murdering someone, but you can kind of understand the mindset and what they're thinking. And personally, I would say that the killer probably enjoyed what they do, because they do. These people are sick. And they are twisted and they do enjoy killing people. That is the truth. And so, you know, his answer was truthful. Doesn't mean that he killed them, but his answer was truthful. And I could answer exactly like he did. They take them near the woods and near a busy road, and they're not afraid of them screaming because nobody will hear them. It's just facts. Those are facts. And just because I know things like that, or would presume that the killer would think things like that, doesn't mean that I have killed them. Kind of thing. It's just getting into the minds, and probably a lot of you guys could answer those questions exactly the same way, because clearly you enjoy true crime, or else you wouldn't be here watching this video. Thank you, by the way. And you know, it's just one of them things that you can just get into the mindset. That's all it is. I'm not going to give my opinion either way in this because I truly don't know like who did this at all, but I can see both sides. I can see why the police were targeting Damian. Obviously, with him being covered in mud and things like that, and then he's saying all of these strange things, the police think it's odd, and then he didn't pass a polygraph. Not that that's evidence against him, because it really isn't. He was this Satanist who was into things like true crime and things like that. I get it, but on the other hand, it seems like they were solely just focused on him when there were so many other suspects that it could have been, and they just didn't focus on them whatsoever. You will find out during this case that the police work of this case was pretty atrocious. You know, they did a lot of things they shouldn't have done. They didn't look into other suspects. They just focused on Damian. They thought that he had done it along with his other two friends. And that was that. A month had passed and they pretty much had nothing to show for it, and so they're focusing solely on Damian again. They actually brought him in and interrogated him more than any other suspect, even though they said that he was not a direct suspect, more of a source of information. Then on the 3rd of June, police go ahead and interrogate another teenager called Jesse Miskelly, and, well, he confessed. Jesse was 17 and he had this reputation. He would often get into fights at school. He had this real big temper and would just fly off the handle, and he often couldn't control that, which would lead to the fights. Jesse also decided to drop out of school, and a major thing that people focus on throughout this case, and it should be focused on, was that he had an IQ of 72, and he was also classed as a minor. Now, he did know Damian from school, but they weren't particularly close, not like him and his friend. So let's get back to the police questioning him. Jesse was actually questioned without his parents there, and of course that is a no-no for a minor. Apparently his dad did give his permission for him to go with the police, but he never gave permission for them to interrogate him without a parent there at all. And get this, he was questioned for 12 hours. So a minor questioned for 12 hours without a parent there and without their express permission. Not only that, normally these things are recorded, and they recorded 2 segments of the entire 12 hours. Those 2 segments totaled 46 minutes. So what happened in the other 11 hours? Kind of thing. And why was that not on tape? A few hours into his interrogation is when he actually made his confession.
What occurred while you were there?
When I was there, I saw Damian hit this one boy real bad. Then he started screwing him and stuff.
Alright, you've got in front of you a picture that was taken out of the newspaper, I believe. It's got 3 boys. And these are the 3 boys that were killed on that date in Robin Hood Woods. Which one of those 3 boys is it you say Damian hit? The 3rd picture, which will be...
This boy right here?
Yeah.
Alright, that's the Byers boy.
Christopher.
That's who you're pointing at?
So, you saw Damian strike Chris Byers In the head.
Right.
What did he hit him with?
He hit him with his fist and bruised him all up real bad. Jason turned around and hit Steve Branch.
Okay.
And started doing the same thing. Then the other one took off. Michael Moore took off running. So I chased him and grabbed him and held him till they got there, and then I left.
Inspector Gitchell, let's talk about the things that Jesse told you that are just absolutely incorrect. Now, on page 9 of his statement, Inspector Gitchell, Jesse says that the murders took place around noon. How did you know that was incorrect?
Because the young boys were still in school.
Did at any time when he was telling you these things that you knew were incorrect, did it ever occur to you that what he was telling you was false, his entire story was false?
In Jesse's case, I feel like he did tell us a good bit of the truth, but then they also lessened their activity in a statement. That's just common, at least in my 20 years career.
Is it common for the police to simply ignore these big, obvious problems and just assume that everything else that he's telling you is got to be correct?
Jesse simply got confused.
He did recant his confession later on. He said that he was scared of the police, that they were pressurizing him, that they were threatening him, they were coercing him. And it was just basically a result of all of that, along with being intimidated by the police and tiredness, because he was literally questioned for 12 hours. So obviously he's going to be tired by the end, but after a few hours in. And you don't think that police do that a lot, but they do. They kind of put their line of questioning, like coercion and things like that. They put their line of questioning, like, say, putting something in their mind and then focusing on that point. For example, say that they claim that he was, just for an example, right, zip ties or rope. So the victims were tied up with rope, and they were like, well, were the victims tied up with rope? And then say the person being questioned says, oh no, I think it was a zip tie. And then they say, no, but are you sure that it wasn't rope though? And then they keep doing things like that, and then the victim begins to think, the person being questioned begins to think that it was actually the rope, and then eventually agrees with them. So that is the kind of thing that they do, and it does work sometimes, especially on minors and people potentially like him who has a really low IQ and is vulnerable. So they may keep going over the point of, did you kill him, did you kill him? And eventually this person may then say yes, even though they haven't done it. And then that's them confessing. He also later stated that he didn't understand his Miranda rights. And so, that just goes to show how botched the entire thing was. You're supposed to make sure that they understand the Miranda rights, and he said that he didn't. So, not long after the confession by Jesse, Damian Nichols and Jason Baldwin were then arrested because Jesse had said that these boys also helped him. The police work on this case is just so bad, and it's so unprofessional, and it's just very, very wrong. As with the other, boys in question, let me go into a bit of background of Jason. Jason Baldwin had also been in his past done for shoplifting and vandalism. Again, the two pair, him and Damian were very good friends, and so they probably did that together. I don't know, that's not confirmed. Unlike Damian though, he decided that he was going to stick around school, and he did. He left school with quite good grades. Apparently he had a real talent for drawing and crafting, and one of his teachers actually said that he should go on to college and study design, because they just saw so much potential in his creativity and skills. So back to the arrests. Jesse had a very strong alibi for the night of these murders. The other two, bearing in mind, they didn't, okay? Damian said that he was at home with his grandma making these phone calls, and it turns out that he didn't make any phone calls, and that his grandma said he left for a while. So their alibis didn't really stand up, but Jesse had a very, very strong alibi. He was in the next town over at a wrestling match, and lots of people saw him there. Lots of people came forward to confirm that he was there around the time of the murders. So it was kind of proved that he wasn't there, and yet he confessed to it. So, straight away it doesn't make any sense. They never found any DNA to match the boys to the crime scene. Nothing, literally nothing placed them boys there during that crime. All they really had to tie these other two boys in was Jesse's confession, who apparently was in the next town over at a wrestling match at the time of the murders occurring. So yeah, go figure. I don't get how the police can literally convict or try and convict these guys off of a confession that was probably coerced and forced upon him, and he later said that it was, when he wasn't even in the town at the time. I just don't get it. So obviously they've been arrested, they go to trial and things, and on the 4th of August, all of the guys plead not guilty. The trial was an absolute mess. Just this entire case is an absolute mess. People got up onto that stand, promised that they would tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and they lied. They made it up. So yeah. Some people got up and said that Jason Baldwin told this person that he had done it, that he had killed these boys, or at least one of them, or however many. He later admitted to making it up and basically lying about it all, that Jason never said that to him. Another person who was actually an inmate got up on the stand and testified as well. They said that one of the lads admitted to him that he had done it again, and he later admitted that it wasn't true. He was on drugs, he was on all sorts of things at the time, and he just kind of chugs it down to that basically being high, and he doesn't really know why he made up the story, but he did. He got up on that stand and he told lies about them telling him that they had done it when they never did. There was so much of that in this case. There was so much people getting up there and saying all this stuff when it wasn't even true. They were just making things up. Not only that, there wasn't ever any proof to say that this was satanic whatsoever. And this was backed up more by these turtles that were living in that creek. These turtles were known for biting human flesh. Now, you may think that a turtle wouldn't be able to leave that many marks or anything like that, but the bite marks of this turtle are very much the same as the marks that were found on the boys' bodies, meaning that after these boys had died, the turtles could very well have gone over to them and been snapping at them and left those marks on them that people thought were satanic. The genital area, damage, anything like that, it could have just been done by animals and these turtles. And so it just flings it all out. There was never any proof that it was satanic. There was never any symbol left behind or anything like that at all. Essentially, in a trial, what you're trying to do is to prove beyond reasonable doubt that this person is guilty of that crime. Can you honestly say, knowing all of this information, that that trial was just that? Can you say beyond reasonable doubt that these boys were guilty of killing these kids when there was never any proof of them ever being there? There was just not enough proof to say that they did it, and so the answer should have been no. But shockingly, they were sentenced for it. The jury thought that they did it. I don't get why. I don't get how a jury can convict anyone on such little information. I'm not saying that they didn't do it, because, they could have done. I personally do not know. Nobody knows. But all I'm saying is that there was not enough evidence to convict them, at all. And yet they did. Jason Baldwin and Jessie Miss Kelly were sentenced to life imprisonment without the opportunity of parole. And Damian Nichols was sentenced to death. Yes, death. He was sentenced to death without any evidence that even tied him to the case, apart from a witness seeing him a bit muddy. I just seriously couldn't even believe it when I was looking into this case. I just don't get how it's so wrong. It really is. The mind just boggles on this one. As I said in the beginning of the video, this case was huge. It was in the public eye so much. Even celebrities got on the bandwagon of trying to get the Memphis Three out of jail because they believed that there was not enough evidence to convict them. Celebrities such as Johnny Depp, or loads of others, were all backing him up. They did films about it. I believe Paradise Lost did 3 films on it, and they were all based off this. They did these huge concerts and things where loads of celebrities got up and spoke about them, and they were just trying to get the Memphis Three out of jail. It is just so inspiring what they actually did to support them. When you watch the videos and things, it's amazing. And they were basically saying what I'm saying. Just because they dressed and acted in a certain way or believed in Satanism does not mean that they were killers. Over the many, many years, people did try to get them out. The lawyers tried to get them out. They were denied the chance of parole many, many times. So they were just sat in jail. All the while, these other suspects that could have potentially done it, the police never even looked into them, really. Firstly, very early on in the investigation, there were 2 other teenagers that could have been possible suspects. Chris Morgan and Brian Holland. Both had drug offense histories, criminal histories, and they left for California just 4 days after the boys' bodies were found. Chris also used to drive an ice cream truck around the area where the boys lived. He was familiar with the boys because of that. They did look into them a little bit. On the 17th of May, they were arrested and they took polygraphs. They denied any involvement, and that was said to be deceptive. Now, during interviews, one said that he took a lot of drugs, that he had blackouts, and he never remembered what happened during these blackouts and things like that. They said that he said that he could have killed the boys for all he knew. He just didn't remember what happened in these blackouts. But he did recant that later. So obviously they were arrested in California because that's where they were at the time. So, and the California took blood samples, urine samples, and they sent them back to Memphis Police Department. But there was never any evidence that the Memphis Police Department investigated these boys any further after they were arrested. So it just seems like they knew Damian had done it and them boys had done it, and so they just didn't bother looking into that. Another very plausible suspect was Terry Hobbs, which, as you know, was Stevie's stepdad. And I said in the beginning of the video how it would tie in. Well, here it is. He was apparently very abusive. He had a history of violence, aggression. He would often hit his wife and he would become very, very angry. And he did even admit that he would get so mad at her because Stevie was getting more attention than he was. I also saw this video of Terry, and it was when the couple were being interviewed and discussing Stevie. Just take a look at his face, seriously. Like, his mum sat there and Terry sat next to her, and please just look at his expression as the mother is answering the question, because honestly, it's just a picture.
The accused teenagers, and it became undeniable that the brutal murders had been part of a satanic ritual. Back with us today, Pam and Terry Hobbs. I mean, all murder is horrible. Is the manner of the specific manner in which he died, is that something that will always haunt you?
Yeah, I'll go to my grave with it, thinking about it. I realize my son.
What do you guys think about that? A little bit odd, right? Now, more importantly, there was also a hair found at the scene. It was on one of the shoelaces that had been used to tie one of the boys. I believe it was Michael's shoelace. And that hair was eventually matched to Terry Hobbs. And as you already know, he was the last person to have been seen with Stevie. Not only that, both of the children, Amanda, his own daughter, and Stevie, his stepson, were afraid of him. There's even a lot of controversy around Amanda, who ended up getting involved in drugs in later life, and she literally couldn't remember a lot of her childhood, most of her childhood, which begs to question how much did he actually abuse her so that she either didn't want to remember or her brain had blocked it out or something. She literally doesn't remember it, and that is bad. That is so bad. Stevie was also caught on one occasion saying that Terry would be abusive towards them and he liked Amanda more, and Stevie wanted his mum to leave him. So you've got these three teenagers rotting in jail, the Memphis Three, with having nothing that ties into the case whatsoever, and then you've got Terry Hobbs over here, who's violent, aggressive. He beats his wife, he beats his children. He was last seen with Stevie, and literally there is DNA evidence that ties him to the scene on a child's shoelace that wasn't even his sons. So you can imagine maybe a piece of hair fell off into Stevie's shoelace and it was caught in it when they were tied up, which is, it's quite unlikely, but it can happen. It wasn't even in his shoelace, it was in Michael's shoelace. So how on earth did that hair get there unless he was at the crime scene? Despite that, nothing was done. The three stayed in jail, Terry was looked into, and that was that. On the 29th of October in 2007, papers were filed by Damian's defense lawyers, either trying to get his immediate release or trying to get a retrial. This stated that the DNA evidence linking Terry Hobbs to the crime scene, along with these new statements from his then ex-wife, so obviously they split up, that he deserved to either be released or get the retrial. On the 10th of October in 2008, a judge denied it, saying that the DNA tests were inconclusive. The ruling was appealed at the Arkansas Supreme Court, and that was actually successful. I'm not going to get too much into all of that, but finally, on the 19th of August in 2011, the Memphis Three were finally released from jail under a plea deal. It is something called the Alfred plea deal, and it is where this system allows somebody to admit guilt as well as sustaining their innocence at the same time, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. They basically plead guilty but still say that they're innocent. It's just basically a way where the state don't have to compensate you in any way whatsoever, because you're admitting your guilt, still saying that you're innocent, and if they wrongfully put someone in jail and they found to be not guilty, then they can get like a big payout, and this way they can't. So in my eyes, that's all it's for. But obviously I don't know. I'm just me, and I don't have a clue about these things. So that's what they did. To get out of jail, they admitted their guilt. They pled guilty whilst maintaining that they were innocent, which is just insane. The prosecution then went on to say that they were not pursuing anyone else in this case, that they had their guys, they knew who had done it, and basically, as a result of time served, that is why they were able to get out after they had admitted that they were guilty and innocent. They said that they had found the guilty parties, and that was that as far as they're concerned. When I thought about it personally though, I don't think that any prosecution in their right mind would let a death row inmate walk straight out of there if they were guilty. They're on death row for murder. They still maintain that they're convinced that those are the guys that did it. Both of them were in there without the possibility of parole, and yet they just let them walk straight out of there and like they're living free out here now. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. I think that they knew that they hadn't done it. That's just personal opinion, of course, not fact whatsoever. I just really don't think that they would have let them out, basically. These men spent 18 years in jail. They have always maintained their innocence and still maintain their innocence, and they were finally allowed to walk free, which, if they are innocent, is a very good thing, because, you know, that 18 years of their life was stolen. If they did it, they have served 18 years and are now free. Again, I don't know if they did it or not. This trial left the victims' families really confused, and some were even stating that these men were innocent and that their son's killer is still out there. They truly believed that these men didn't do it and that whoever killed their child was still out there. It did come out later as well that Damian Nichols actually spent 10 years in solitary confinement, and apparently in the 90s he was a few weeks from actually being executed on death row. I don't know what happened to stop that, whether it was his lawyers or something like that, but he would have literally gotten executed for this crime if something hadn't been done about it. The release of the Memphis Three obviously spread far and wide. The case was a lot in the media and things, with the celebrities supporting them and all that. It had a lot of media attention, and it came with it a lot of different emotions from different people. Like, some were angry that they got out. They really did believe that the Memphis Three had killed them, that they were going to be in jail forever, and now they were out roaming free. Others were really, really elated, you know, that they thought they were innocent and they were happy that they were out, and there was just so many mixed emotions.
Damian Nichols has attorneys who want to use a new DNA test called MVAC, a wet vacuum system that can find more DNA than older tests. But Nichols' attorneys got a letter from the custodian of records for the West Memphis Police Department saying some of the evidence ended up lost or misplaced and some destroyed by a fire.
We still don't know who killed these boys, whether it was the Memphis Three, Terry, or just a random person who came across the boys and murdered them.
Terry Hobbs, stepfather of victim Stevie Branch, who was under suspicion but never charged, said he welcomes the new DNA testing.
What this case boils down to at the end of the day is that 3 young boys lost their life, and whoever did it could be still out there, who knows. But what we can't lose sight of is that these poor boys, they were 8 years old, and it is such a sad and tragic case that they were brutally murdered and taken from this world. And truly, we still don't really know what happened to them. And it is just so tragic and such a horrible loss of life. Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers had their whole lives ahead of them. And that was cruelly stolen from them, stolen from their families. And it is just so tragic. At the end of the day, these 3 young boys were murdered. And that cannot get lost in all of this. In all of the Memphis Three case, that is what we need to focus on, and we need to remember those poor boys. I'd love to know your thoughts on this case. Who do you think did it? Please let me know in the comments below. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for similar content. Anyway guys, that's all I have today for the case of the Memphis 3. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.